Money Masters, good day, it is me, SJ. Good day, SJ. I'm a poet and I don't even know it. Okay, this is part C of risk. Please go and check out part A and part B if you haven't done so yet. But in today's episode, I'm going to focus on emotional biases and how they affect our savings and investments. We all have emotions, so we all have emotional biases. Let's see what today's episode is all about. Let's rock and roll. Today I am going to cover 5 emotional biases. These are not the only ones that exist, but in my experience, I believe these 5 emotional biases are the ones that have the greatest impact on us in our savings and investment journey. Remember I said money and emotions are great servants but terrible masters. After today, you are going to master these emotional biases. You can't get rid of them because you can't get rid of emotions. But what I'll do is I will first explain each of the biases, and at the end I'm going to give you some examples of how they're not separated, they intermingle, and this intermingling often causes a perfect storm of emotions that I want you and me to be prepared for so that we can master our money and our emotions. The first bias I want to share with you is negativity bias. This one I actually already explained in part B. Go and check out part B if you haven't done so. Negativity bias comes from the type 1 and type 2 error, and I explained that we as human beings suffer from the type 2 error, which is a false negative. Really what that means, we are risk averse, we want to protect ourselves, we see problems and risks wherever we look so that we can protect ourselves. A good example of this would be, we see a cloud over the horizon, it is not a cloud, it is Godzilla. He destroys cities. So we tend to see problems or risks and we try to avoid them. Remember the reason also that we have this type 2 error, I explained this also in part B, is this negativity that we feel if we make 50 or lose 50. The experience of joy is only one times when we lose the same amount. The experience of pain, the regret, the pain is double. So we naturally try to protect ourselves from that pain, that double pain. So that is negativity bias. The next bias is recency bias. Very easy one if you just look at the name. We tend to place a lot more value on something that happened to us recently, and what we do is we extrapolate that, meaning that if something happened to us recently, positive or negative, we think that that thing is going to continue into the near future and longer term as well. So remember I said positive and negative, but what did I just say in negativity bias? The negative recency causes double the pain than what we would experience if it was a positive recency. And I'll give you some examples at the end of this. The next bias is confirmation bias. Now, confirmation bias is really where we often already think about something in a certain way or believe something, and it gets confirmed to us, our emotion of confirmation. When we hear the same thing on the news or said or told to us by an expert, then it confirms this to us and we believe now that we're on the right track. Remember, a lot of this confirmation comes from media, mainstream or social. And a good explanation of confirmation bias, if you watch the mainstream media about savings and investments and investment markets, it's often negative. Why? Because of negativity bias. These guys know that that double experience of pain is something that they can prey on. And here's a good example of what happens in the media. The pilot has indicated we are going to experience a little turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts. This guy says, we're going to die. And I presume it's his wife, explains he's a financial reporter. So in the media, mainstream or otherwise, these things are often over-exaggerated, which often confirms our fears. And sometimes, not our fears, but also on the positive side. And as I said, I'll give some examples about that. Next on the list is overconfidence bias. Now, so far, I've been talking mostly about negative emotions, negative experiences that carry more weight. But with overconfidence bias, we can also become overconfident in our ability. And it's often connected to recency bias. And when we become overconfident, we believe we are so good that we can start taking extra risk. And that can be very dangerous, because when things are going well and we start experiencing this overconfidence bias, the one very important factor that is often overlooked is the difference between luck and skill. Okay, so I've mentioned this book a couple of times, Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. He's got a chapter in this book dedicated to this specific luck and skill differentiation, and it's actually called Luck and Risk. And in this chapter, there is a section where he talks about a conversation he had with Robert Shiller. Robert Shiller is well known in the savings and investment industry. He is a Nobel Prize winner for economics. And Morgan asked Robert Shiller, what do you want to know about investing that we can't know? In other words, the ungoogleable question. And Robert Shiller said, the exact role of luck in successful outcomes. And this overconfidence actually is very rife in the investment industry, specifically among investment professionals, or what we call professional fund managers, the people who manage our funds often in mutual funds and unit trusts. An example of this can be found in the book Behavioral Investing by James Montier. The book was published in 2007, but in 2006 he did research for this book that is found in this book, and it is a study that was called Behaving Badly. And what James Montier did is he asked 300 professional fund managers if they thought their work was below average, their work performance or job performance was below average, average or above average. 74% of them said they had above average job performance. 74% are above average. Now, if there's an average, it means that there should be some on top and some below. But 74 thought they were above average. And the remaining 26% thought they were at least average. At least average. So nobody, or none of the 300 professionals that he asked, thought they were below average. So that's just an example of overconfidence bias, specifically in this case in the investment industry. The next and last bias I want to cover today is anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is where you are anchored to your first impression. So here you can think about, let's say, a ship dropping its anchor and it is stuck there. And a good example in picture format of this anchor to your first impressions is what we all experience probably once a year or more: Black Friday sale, Cyber Monday sale. So here's an example. Originally, this item cost 300, I think that's renminbi, 300. But in any case, they anchor you to 1,000. Draw a line through it and then put 300 there. And we think we're getting a good deal because we are anchored to something. we are anchored in this case to the 1,000 and the price didn't actually change. So anchored to first impressions. Let's recap those biases and then I'll give you a couple of examples. So we've got negativity bias, recency bias, confirmation bias, overconfidence, which includes the difference between luck and skill, and anchoring bias. So a lot of these biases I can explain using one picture, because remember I said they intermingle. So let's have a look at this. We've got here the average return over the past 5 years, then over the last year, and I'll get to this part in a second. So basically, if you've been investing for a longer period of time, you've experienced this, you can experience overconfidence bias, coupled with recency bias, and then suddenly, boom, negative market, you start losing money. So if you've been overconfident, one of the worst things you could have done is go and borrow money to invest in the market, and that could turn out very badly if this is the next thing that happens. Also, you anchor perhaps the value of your portfolio. So let's say you've got a couple of stocks in the portfolio, or you own a unit trust, and the last value that you remember is, let's say, a value of $500 worth. So now you've got an anchor. When you look at your portfolio again, it's worth a lot less than 500. So those emotions all come flooding in. What happens in this area is your most recent experience, recency bias, says that things are going very poorly and will they continue? So should I continue investing or start investing? So you've got recency and negativity, and perhaps when you started investing in the beginning of this period, you anchored somewhere that the investment market, specifically maybe the stock market, is very, very risky. So now that has been confirmed to you. I knew it was risky, I'm going to lose all my money. So now it's recency, confirmation, and you can see how these emotional biases play on how we behave and act in our investment journey. Just to conclude on this, if we're experiencing recency bias, negativity bias, confirmation bias, and we've anchored there, we've got lots of questions, this is an opportunity to start investing or to continue investing. It is an opportunity. You should not be afraid of that. If you have your risk framework correct, you know what you're saving for, the time horizon you have, that is an opportunity to keep investing or to start investing so that you can get excess returns in the longer term. There you have it, emotional biases, what you should be careful about. Make yourself ready emotionally, think about your mindset, get it right for when these things come your way. What's next? The last video on risk, part D. Can there be more risk stuff? Don't worry, part D is going to be a nice gift-wrapped conclusion and summary of part A, B and C, and the most important factors or issues that I shared in those 3 videos. I'm going to wrap up and conclude for you in the last video on risk. Remember that if you like this video and you learned something, you can subscribe wherever you see this icon. That's the subscribe icon. And you can follow me on Twitter at MoneyMasterSJ on Twitter. Lovely to see you today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.